Hello and welcome to IOHR TV. My name is Trish Lynch. Today I have the pleasure to interview Irina Von Wiese, who is a Liberal Democrat MEP and Vice Chair of the Subcommittee on Human Rights. She is also a lawyer and a civil rights activist who has a refugee crisis at heart. She's also hosted many refugees in her very own home. Ms. Von Wiese, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Now, you've campaigned for human rights worldwide. Tell me, what are the key issues that you're working on at the moment as an MEP?
Well, we have over the past 7 months of my mandate worked in various countries across the globe, of course. And I think we are facing, unfortunately, an unprecedented crisis of human rights in countries that were not traditionally part of those countries, those crisis countries. So one of my very first cases was actually concerning the situation of families in refugee camps in the United States. And it's the first time that we had an urgency and case brought to the plenary of the European Parliament regarding a United States case. So it's not just the usual suspects, but of course we worked on the crisis in China with the incarceration of over 1 million Uyghurs in camps in China. We worked on specific human rights cases in Egypt, in Turkey, which I'm sure we will come back to later on, but also in South America, where we have seen an increasing rate of human rights violations that had to do not only with human rights defenders, but environmental rights defenders and many other countries. And unfortunately, we also had to deal with the refugee crisis and some cases within the European Union.
Now, you're both a German and a British citizen. You came to London in 1996, and you said that because of the EU and the freedom of movement, you were able to build a home, have a family, and have a life in London. How do you think Brexit will change British and European priorities when it comes to human rights issues?
I think Britain will lose its stand in the world order. It will lose its voice in Europe, which is, still an authoritative voice in human rights. It's still the biggest defender of human rights, and standing alone is not going to enable Britain to have that voice. We know that, for example, when we talk to human rights defenders and victims of human rights violations in the Commonwealth country. I have recently been on a mission to Kashmir, to the Pakistani side of Kashmir, where we talked to Kashmiri refugees from many parts of the subcontinent. And they told us, we need Britain in the EU, where British MEPs have traditionally spoken up for us, have spoken up for the former colonies, have spoken up specifically for human rights in the subcontinent. Who now will speak up for us? Britain on its own is not going to have that voice. And the other worrying thing, of course, is who are our allies really going to be? Trump is not really upholding human rights in his own country anymore, and yet we will be dependent to such a large degree on trade with the United States. Are we going to really speak up about, for example, the dismal situation in the Mexican-US border camps? And if it's not the United States, who else is it going to be? President Xi of China, or maybe President Putin of Russia, or the Indian Prime Minister Modi, or maybe Recep Erdogan? Who is it going to be that we will have to depend on? And what kind of concessions will Britain have to make in terms of human rights to work with these people?
Of course, it's the wider implications too, isn't it? What kind of impact do you think Brexit will have on the case of, for example, the dual national Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe?
Well, actually, it's a very good question, because I met with Richard Ratcliffe, her husband, only 2 weeks ago. And Richard told us he was extremely worried because Nazanin will lose her EU citizenship. And with EU citizenship comes a much greater protection of individual and human rights than the British citizenship alone can give her. So, for example, the MEPs who are representing her, and she is in my constituency in London, we will not be able to speak up for her anymore in the European Parliament. And her husband was extremely worried about that. There are currently, I think, over 20 EU citizens who are detained in Iranian prisons as hostages, effectively, to extract concessions from EU member states. And we're hoping very much that my colleagues who are remaining in the European Parliament will be able to speak up for all of them, including Nazanin, but officially she will lose that voice.
You wonder how much more that poor family can take, really, don't you? It just seems to keep coming and coming.
Absolutely. And, it doesn't look like our current government is going to be able to really speak up loudly for her.
I know. Very tragic. On the 31st of January, Britain's going to leave the EU. Do you see the work that you've done as an MEP, as a member of the Subcommittee for Human Rights, do you see that being adequately replaced and continuing by the UK government outside of the European Union?
Well, it remains to be seen. I mean, I have worked very effectively with my friends and partners from the other member states, from the EU27. I'm handing over a lot of my casework to them. I trust that they will continue this work in the EU. As far as the UK is concerned, you will not be surprised to hear I have very little faith in our government. But there is a silver lining, which is that we have already established an EU-UK friendship group in the European Parliament. We will continue working with Europe. We will continue being the voice of pro-European Brits in Europe. We will continue working in civil society. We now have the biggest pro-European movement anywhere in Europe, ironically, in Britain. I think it's extremely important that we continue doing that, not only to fight for citizens' rights, for the 3 million EU27 citizens in Britain, for the 1.5 million UK citizens who are stranded in the EU27 member states without knowing what their rights will be, but also, of course, to keep up the good cooperation, to keep us as closely aligned to the European Union and to pave the way eventually to rejoin.
Irina Von Wiese, we thank you for sharing with us the incredible work that you're doing, and we wish you well.
Thank you very much.
And thank you at home for joining us for another episode of IOHR TV. Please tune in for the next episode. From myself, Trish Lynch, and the entire team, take care. Goodbye.